And so our presenter today is Jiri Hulcr. He's a professor of forest entomology at the University of Florida School of Forest, Fisheries, and Geomatic Sciences. We call it just FFGS over there. His focus is mostly on the interactions between forest insects, trees, and ultimately people. His team maintains the largest collection of cryopreserved bark and ambrosia beetles. So we can hang our hat on the fact that the University of Florida has this fabulous collection. And lately, Jiri has gotten really interested in the importance of dead wood and wood in the backyard as it relates to the ecology of our landscape and the ecosystem services that that type of wood presents to our landscape and then ultimately to our environment. So Jiri, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Hello, everyone. And I'm amazed to see all these counties. It looks like if we're successful today, there's going to be deadwood all over Florida. Yay. I'm looking forward to that. So I will share my little spiel with you. And we will be talking about stumps today. I will give a little kudos to Wendy because that is her title. She came up with that because she's amazing. And so, hello everyone, and thank you. I was already introduced. I don't have to do that. We will talk about the awesomeness of stumps, deadwood, brush piles, and so on, and ultimately about our NeighborWood Watch campaign. So, first of all, I wanted to emphasize that everything I'm saying here is here for you. I will be very happy to share this presentation with anyone who asks for it. There's a lot of materials, a lot of facts. You don't have to memorize anything. Please just contact me and I'll be happy to provide, or Wendy or Master Gardeners. So let's talk about dead wood. You probably already know this, but dead wood in urban yards may be the next hot thing to teach gardeners about. Tell me if you've heard of it, please. This is our first poll here. And so push the right button, whether you have no idea, I've never heard of it, or you've heard of it, but it's kind of like you don't really know, or if you're already on board and if you're already preaching the gospel. So let us know. I'll give you, how about 30 seconds or something like that. And once you all have a chance to reply, the poll will go away and we'll see the results. Okay. That's cool. So very few people didn't hear about it. Most of you heard about it, and some of you are already on board. This is fantastic. You know why this is interesting? Because many of you have already heard of it, but your community may not have. And so that is why we are doing this presentation, this meeting, because you already probably know, but this is for you to tell others, to let others know that how really interesting, important, and beautiful deadwood can be in your yard. My first question is, or the question you may often get is, if you want to keep deadwood, are you weird? Am I weird? And I have to tell you, I don't think so. Some things that were normal in the past are not normal anymore. Aesthetic norms change, right? Some things we used to recommend to people, like uniform turf, you can use it, but we also recommend something else now. We recommend a little bit of diversity. Things changed. I would say you're no longer weird at all, in fact. Aesthetic norms change, and in fact, this is becoming a big thing. There are there's substantial coverage in the media about this, in some of the leading newspapers and online resources, and millions of people are interested in maintaining deadwood in their yard. there is one other reason, which is it's also about what kind of legacy we're leaving. You know, this is a playground in Florida. This is a playground in Germany. And I'm not making this up. You know, obviously we all live in Florida. We know that our kids interact with plastic quite a lot. Even the turf there is not turf, but plastic. But this is what's happening elsewhere in the world. So I would say you're no longer weird if you are interested in deadwood in your habitat, in your own ecosystem. You're slowly catching up with the rest of the world. Here's another little story for you. And by the way, anytime you have an additional question or something like that, I think throw it in a chat and I think folks will let me know. So this is the story of human life, right? Right? Or is there something missing? I would say there's something really profound that's missing. The whole other half of human life was missing from that simplified story. The part about dignity, the part about wisdom. Whatever we accumulate through life, then we have to give in the other part of life. And the same goes with a tree. If we plant an acorn, it grows into a little seedling, and that grows into a majestic tree. But that's not the end of a tree's role. The tree actually continues living, and that's the dignity part. And that's when the tree starts giving back really substantially itself, whatever it accumulated through its life. What do I mean exactly by tree giving back? Well, it starts giving back to the ecosystem. A dead oak has about 20 tons of biomass. When it dies, where does it all go? And here again, please let me know what you think. Where does the 20 tons of an oak that slowly disintegrates, where does it go? Either somebody eats it, or it slowly evaporates, or it goes back into the ground. What do you think? Again, we have about 30 seconds to answer these questions. Okay, the poll is being closed, and now we'll see the result. Most of you think that it goes back into the ground. Some of you actually got the right answer. Some of that goes back into the ground, yes, but almost all of it is eaten by something else. This is why trees eventually disappear. This is why deadwood slowly disappears. Actually, some of that goes into the ground, yes, but that's the minority. What really happens is that tree becomes most alive when it dies. And this is how you can actually see it with your own eyes. If I'm sure you've seen this. If you zoom in on dead wood, it's full of life. Particularly fungi are the ones that are taking advantage of all these nutrients and are starting to live on it. Here you could see about 3 species, right, of fungus. If you zoom in, you will see different morphologies of these fungi. Now, we have done a lot of analyses on dead wood, and we know that if you take some of that dead material and grind it up and extract DNA or the genetic information from it, in one dead pine in Florida, we found 84 fungal species. That's a zoo. That's more than a zoo. That's like a rainforest jungle right in one trunk of a dead pine. Now, a lot of that goes back to the ecosystem through insects. So insects are really important in the cycle of deadwood. And I'll get you started in understanding that in what you probably wouldn't think of as a beneficial ecosystem component, the pine bark beetles. Why I'm bringing this up? Well, because many of you heard of the pests, right? Many of you have heard of the black trumpet-pine beetle and the southern pine beetle as tree-killing organisms. Well, yes, but there are other bark beetles that live in dead pines, And actually, the majority of them, like 99.9%, live in pines that they are not going to kill any pine. And there's an entire other pile of diversity of these bark beetles that you never hear about because they don't bother anyone. They don't kill any trees, but they're still a really important part of the ecosystem. And now this is a pine bark beetle on one tree genus, right? So let's look at all bark beetles. Let's include all the oaks and hickories and sweet gums and everything. And how many bark beetles do you think live in Florida total on all tree species? Give me your guess. 5 or 35 or more like 135? And you have about 30 seconds to think about it. And once most of you respond, then the poll will be closed and we'll see your responses. I know you don't know it, but that's fine. You can just guess. That's the point, right? Is to guess. So what do you think? Yes, most of you got it right. Absolutely. In Florida, there are over 100, probably something like 135 species. This is the list, well, the like sort of a picture of all the bark beetles that live in Florida. And now they all obviously live in deadwood. They are processing the deadwood and passing it down to the rest of the ecosystem. Because you know what? These are eaten by birds and spiders and everything else. Now, here's my other question. How many of these are pests? What do you think? And the new poll will pop up. And how many of these bark beetles you think are pests? Meaning they actually kill perfectly healthy trees. What do you think? How many bark beetles are pests? I know you don't necessarily have to know that, but again, give us your best guess. Okay, we're closing the poll. And yes, most of you are right. There are really only 5, and it's these 5 there are considered pests because they sometimes go into a living tree. Now, we can have an entire other conversation about and a whole other presentation about why they go into living trees. Turns out it's not the bug's fault. It's usually that the tree is stressed by something else. But that's a different lecture. We now know that the great majority of even bark beetles are not harmful. They're actually a really important part of the ecosystem. Where you can see this best is out in the wilderness. And here I like to quote my friend and colleague's results. Mark Darup has obsessively studied insects from deadwood on a single Florida location in the Archbold Biological Station. And guess how many beetles he found coming out from deadwood in that one location? Over 450 species. That is a crazy diversity. You know, in the entirety of England, there is 4,000 species. So a tenth of the entire island could be found on a single little place in Florida. And there are also a lot of bees and wasps, like solitary bees, are native bees, and wasps that eat other insects live in these dead logs. And here, you know what's cool? This is in Archbold. Archbold is really kind of hostile, dry. How about your backyard in Miami or Tallahassee, or your client's backyard in anywhere else in Florida where it actually rains and where it's very diverse? That kind of log pile could host massively bigger diversity. So really, we're sort of sitting on a potentially an incredible part of our biodiversity. And here I'm going to leave you for 20 seconds to read this, what I think is a very profound observation. So I will And just with a statement that even the most obsessive entomologists can only examine a tiny fraction of the diversity in deadwood in a typical tree. So that's the insect level, right? How about we go up a level in the ecosystem pyramid? Let's talk about birds. Many of your clients and perhaps yourself already know that many birds require deadwood or at least cavities. Many of them create cavities, but few people know how many birds really depend on cavities in wood. This is the list of Florida species that nest in tree cavities. So without those, we would not have all our woodpeckers, our bluebirds, our nuthatches, our wood ducks, our owls. Tree cavities are really important for birds. And now we're going to the best part, the mammals. Isn't that amazing? And I don't have a poll for this. I'm sure many of you know what this is. In my opinion, this is the cutest mammal in North America. It is obviously the flying squirrel, the eastern flying squirrel. And many of you, if you have a deadwood and if you have big trees with some cavities, you probably have those in your yard. I'm pretty sure you do. And you don't even need to know about them. You probably hear them, and even if you don't hear them, they're there. And you know what? Here's one other observation by Mark Derup. I'll let you read it again. So we don't really need to observe all these things all the time, right? It's not like a Disney park or anything like that. But we know that deadwood is an amazing generator of biological diversity. So we're going to go explore this idea that using deadwood in our yards, in our urban landscapes, serves as a tool to rewild our landscapes. What does that mean? You know, that means essentially provide our lands to the rest of the creation, to the rest of the diversity around us. But let's see what is the actual goal. Is the goal to essentially go back in time and to create the landscapes that were here before people like this? There used to be a lot of dead wood back then. You know, there used to be an incredible diversity. You probably know that North America was more diverse than Africa is now before these big animals and everything went extinct. But it's unlikely they will go back, right? That's just not going to happen. Instead of going back, we can think about deadwood as a tool for sustaining the future. Because deadwood plays some really significant roles. One, it stores carbon, which we need desperately to store somewhere. It preserves the creation or the diversity, whatever name you want to add it, give it. And it's a really important legacy to the next generations about what kind of landscapes do we want to leave to the future. So should we reserve our wilderness for that, for the deadwood? You know, you probably know that that's just not going to happen. A designated wilderness is only about 3% of our land in North America. Very little of that is in the East, and it really isn't going to happen. So instead of just thinking that nature can live in wilderness away from our homes, how about we have this in our garden? And this is not necessarily my idea. I'm sure you've heard that. There are other people who are proposing that instead of relying on the wilderness, we should just have the national park in our yard. And I highly recommend that you check out this project, the Homegrown National Park. This is a project run by Doug Talamis and many other people helping with this. It's a new approach for conservation that starts with you, with your yard, or in your case, with your client's yard. And it really is the nature's not only best hope, it's pretty much the only hope that we turn our yards into a nature-friendly spaces. So check out that project and you can become a part of it. Now, how do we teach about deadwood? Most people think it's ugly. Well, like we talked about that, right? Aesthetic norms change, emotional norms change. We can absolutely talk about this in a way that makes people realize that what they have is a treasure. And here I'm using that old, saying that many people know it, but why not repeat it, right? We can teach that it's totally okay to love your stump. And you would not believe how many people who already have their stump say exactly that. They use the word love. They love their stump in their front yard or then their backyard. It is completely correct to believe that you and your stump, your deadwood, are part of something bigger, something more profound than just me, me, me. And it is totally appropriate to mourn its loss. It is perfectly fine to be sad that some of these incredible spaces and ecosystem services and biodiversity hotspots are disappearing from our landscapes because they're being forcefully removed. It is not necessary, and it's totally fine to be sad about it and communicate that sadness to other people. A lot of people will tell you, oh, I don't want any dead stump in my yard because it's blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to go walk you through several myths that people often invoke when they're sort of justifying why not to have dead wood in their yard. So the grumpy face here often says something like, well, dead trees breed bark beetles, right? Well, you already know from before that it really does not. It is not actually true. This is a tree bark, specifically the loblolly pine, that is attacked by the southern pine beetle. And yes, that happens, absolutely. But you know what? In Florida, only two species, the southern pine beetle and the black turpentine beetle, are actual pests of living trees, and they only go to fresh pine. If the pine is dead, these beetles aren't going to be interested in it. So the idea that somehow leaving dead wood in my yard breeds pests is actually completely upside down. That is based on an old, outdated understanding of the ecosystem, and it's just not true. This type of wood definitely does not breed bark beetles. It breeds all kinds of other beetles, but not the pests. That is important. Remember that it does not breed the pests. The other thing that our grumpy face could say is it breeds termites. Well, you know what? Deadwood absolutely breeds termites. There's no question about it. And it might actually be a good thing. Because you know what? Termites are nature's factory for turning wood into digestible biomass. And here I'm going to pause a little bit and explain what I mean by this. These are obviously termites flying around above, at night. And termites are actually a unique insect. They can turn cellulose, which is the building blocks of dead wood, of any wood, into what's called the fatty acids. Those are the little building blocks of cellulose itself. Fatty acids are the fuel of life, of insect life, or of birds. Everything wants to eat termites, from ants to dragonflies to birds to whatever is sniffing around your yard, possums, armadillos, everything. If we did not have termites and fungus, the dead wood would just stay there. It would just remain dead wood. But fortunately, we have these critters that turn it into a digestible source of food for other organisms. And you know what? There are simple things you can do so the termites that you don't want in your house, to prevent them from going to your house. First, don't stack it near the house. Easy. You can easily say that to your clients. Termites live in dead roots in the ground. So if a tree dies, the natural event that happens is that the roots underground get heavily colonized by termites. Absolutely. Always in Florida. Yeah, that's their natural habitat. It's not really the stump. It's the roots. So yes, there are what's called the subterranean termites, and they're often pests of houses. But you don't get rid of them by removing the stump. You get rid of them, or you prevent their attack on your house by using the baits, which is what this is. This is University of Florida invention, by the way, and it works. So don't hesitate to recommend baits. And here, notice I'm not recommending insecticidal sprays. Those are questionable. And if you need more information about that, I will provide resources at the end. But baits are great. They protect your house and they don't harm any of the diversity outside of your house. So that was the termites. What is our grumpy face going to say now? Well, deadwood needs to be removed because the homeowners association does not allow it. You know, that is probably the most common comment I get, or my team gets. And again, there are some really easy fixes to that. First, you can mark your tree as a feature, not as a problem, but as an intentional element in your yard. And if it has a nice label, and if it has a nice path around it or something like that, suddenly it becomes a desirable feature. Second, you know, you don't have to have it in front. You could also keep that wood in the back where it doesn't offend anybody. And another thing is that it would be great to have piles and piles and piles of dead wood, but you know, even a log pile is okay. Even a small steps are better than nothing. So what I think is most important, however, here is to sort of get talking and be a part of the HOA, and maybe you can serve on the landscape committee. I'm sure many of you already are. And start talking about the importance of deadwood, these nice habitat snags, or sometimes they're called woodpecker poles, sometimes they're called the wilderness trees. Talk about their importance. They can be made into a nice landscape element. The other thing that people often worry about, and rightly so, is that a dead tree will fall one day on their house. Here is what the International Society of Arboriculture says. You know, ISA, International Society of Arboriculture, these are the guys who are managing your trees in your yard, right? So ISA has a recommendation for that. Turn it into 2/3 of the risk distance. And here's what I mean by that. Here's what they mean by that. This is your house, and this is your dead snag, your habitat snag, or your wilderness tree. This is the risk distance. This is 2/3 of it. Just have them chop it down. That's totally fine. It doesn't have to be a ginormous risk posing, you know, statue. It's fine if it's a smaller snag. It's still gonna be loved by the woodpeckers and by the bugs and everything. So we were dispelling some of the myths. And now I'm gonna get you through some of the resources that are available to you if you are interested in teaching about deadwood. One of them is our recent extension publication, Woodpecker Poles and Habitat Wood in Your Yard. If you're interested in that, you're welcome to either take a snapshot of this QR code or simply look it up. You know, it's really easy to find it. It's a brand new publication, and it'll give you all the things that I just mentioned with more detail, and you are invited, you're encouraged to distribute that publication to your clients or whoever else is listening. And there's one other recommendation specifically for you that only later will become directed to your clients. For you, we have a campaign. We call it the NeighborWood Watch, and you could look up that website, neighborwoodwatch.org. This is what we do. It's directed to two different audiences. One is you, the Florida Master Gardeners. One is the ISA, the International Society of Arboriculture, is the tree guys. And what we want to know is which of these two communities is more effective at communicating the deadwood message. So both of you, or both of these communities, are receiving these lectures and this outreach. And what we want to know, what we would like you to do are these few simple steps. First, inform your clients about the awesome options for deadwood retention in their yard. Simple, right? You do that all the time. That's part of your work. You can then send them to the project's website easy, neighborwoodwatch.org. And there they can join. They click a button, they will get a little nice plaque like this, actually etched into wood by a laser. It's really cute. And you will be counted. They will be counted too, but they will actually be asked whether who they received that recommendation from. And if it comes from you or the Florida Master Gardener, you will be counted. So that is how you can sort of tell us that this organization is effective in spreading this message. We're then going to analyze the data and submit it to the Journal of Extension, and we would like to answer the question, who drives more traffic towards this sort of new-ish element in our urban landscapes? So if you can, please go ahead and look up that website, neighborwoodwatch.com, and start talking to your clients about it and see what happens. Thank you so much. This was all I had prepared for you today, and I would love to take some questions. I will stop sharing right now, and if there are any questions, please put them in the Q&A session.
Good, good. We have lots of questions.
Okay.
I'm gonna start with our first one that we got right off the bat from Janice in Volusia County. She
Okay.
says she has a friend who complains about the stinky mushrooms in her yard, probably on rotting wood, right? I don't know what to tell her, but I think it's good.
I know what to tell her. I'll tell her two things.
Okay.
Stinky mushrooms, well, I'll tell her three things. Stinky mushrooms are incredibly interesting organisms. You know why they're stinky? Because they have this adaptation for their spores being dispersed by flies. No other organism does that. So they stink on purpose. So they attract flies and the flies spread them around. They don't actually live on your dead wood. That's the other thing I wanted to tell you. They are not going to grow from your stump or anything like that. They grow from litter in the ground, from dead leaves and grass and roots. They're disintegrating in the ground. Mostly they live on dead trees and like the shrubbery type of like under trees where leaves disintegrate. That's where they're the dead man's fingers and that kind of stuff. That's where they grow. It's not related to your dead wood. And always, I know they stink like hell, but you know, besides that stench, they're really interesting. And the last thing I wanted to tell you is on our website. We have a specific video dedicated to mushrooms and fungi and all these things on dead wood. So take a look, and maybe it'll nudge you a little bit towards disrespecting these smelly neighbors to actually understanding that they have a place in the big scheme of the creation.
Great. I know Janice will share that with her neighbor. Joyce Lobach says, I've heard that King Charles from UK has maintained what he calls a stumpery, one of his estates. This has inspired me to have my own. She doesn't have as many opportunities in her Florida gardens, but she is wanting to think of old wood and use pieces as garden accents.
This is amazing. You know, I have never heard of the King's Stumpery, and I will absolutely look into that. Thank you for letting me know. What I can tell you is that, so I travel around Europe quite a lot for my work and so on. And I'm really amazed by how many old castles and old houses and newly renovated castles and cities, squares, and so on are already incorporating deadwood into their landscaping. Sometimes it's a little kitschy. They're like, there's a ginormous slab of wood sitting across the lawn, which is like, am I supposed to sit on it? Or is this, you know, for the fungus? Like, I don't really know. But often they're actually doing it for a purpose. And here's maybe why too, because the European Union has already a legislation that supports that certain percentage of trees in urban and non-urban landscapes should be left intentionally as deadwood, as they call it, the legacy, deadwood legacy or legacy elements. So it is recognized on a much higher level than just homeowners in Europe.
Fantastic. Let's see. The next one is a little about the termites. You know, we protect for termites.
Absolutely.
You brought up the Centricon. We talk about, that's a big concern, not only for master gardeners personally, but how they educate. And so if you would like to unpack that a little bit for us.
I can. You know, have you seen a termite flight sometime? You know how that works, right? Sometimes when it's not too hot, not too cold, after it rains, the next day, usually in the morning when the sun comes out, termites start flying. That's a trigger for them. It rains and they start flying the next day. Notice where they're flying from. It's never from a stump. It's always from what looks like a ground, right? Sometimes it's like a dead stump that's sticking out of the ground, but mostly it's actually the dead roots that are normal. Like Florida is, covered, is underlaid by dead roots because our trees have really long roots. They reach out many feet in yards. And it's those dead roots that are the natural habitat for these subterranean termites. That's where they live. So it's totally fine to leave a stump. Yes, there will be termites, but they're the majority, even close of them. We do recommend not stacking deadwood right next to the house, and we do recommend the termite baits, which are non-toxic, and they really work.
Fantastic. Kathy Hoare asked a question, and I was curious about this too, especially for our South Florida people who have a lot of large non-native trees. Are the fungus and insects similar on the non-native trees as they are on the native trees, and how does that affect the population and the health of the insects and the fungus?
Interesting. So if the question is about native versus non-native tree deadwood, there is a significant difference. Our insects have evolved with the trees that are here for millions of years. That's what they know how to eat. They know how to eat the oaks, the hickories, the sweet gums, the pines. If you bring in a
Royal
camphor
Poinciana, yeah.
Louisiana has very similar trees, but if you bring in camphor or a Chinese tallow or any other exotic privet, for example, notice if you cut down a privet, leave it in your yard, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just sitting there. And you know why? Because neither our bugs nor our fungi know what to do with it. Sometimes this wood really lasts a long time, and that's not a good sign. That means that no one's eating it. It means that it's not supporting the rest of the ecosystem. So that's another reason why we often prefer native trees, also for
Good
the
to know.
deadwood.
Anne really liked the pictures of the playground and is wondering if there's any way to share this philosophy with the people who are promoting playgrounds out there.
That's a big one. Yeah. That's a hard one. I think about it a lot and I don't have a solution. I'll just give you maybe two observations, and I would love to get somehow involved in it, but I don't know how, and I'm not sure. One observation is that when I go past some of those playgrounds, when it says don't leave your children unattended, I would like to plaster something else over it, and then something like consider leaving your children unattended, at least for a while. It'll be good for them. It's not about dead wood. This is about the entire philosophy on life and childcare. We really try to not face the kids with anything that's sort of like maybe they'll get hurt, maybe it's dirty. What if we do it the other way around?
Right. Okay. So Sonia's wondering about carpenter ants.
Carpenter ants create cavities in not necessarily deadwood, but mostly, well, yes, deadwood too. That's where there are actually multiple different species. Some create cavities already in trees that are declining. And yes, they create cavities in the wood that has already died. So they don't kill trees or anything. They can't. They don't go into the living tissue. You know what's interesting? You know what carpenter ants eat? Very few people know that. Most of their diet comes from aphids and sap-sucking insects that live in the canopy of trees and plants. And they lick their little butts and they lick the sweet honeydew. So that's where most of their caloric intake comes from. They're big, really, aren't they? So carpenter ants are also an interesting part of our ecosystem. They hunt termites quite a lot, by the way. They're big competitors. And if you have a solid community of carpenter ants in your stump, you're probably not going to have very many termites. That's how the ecosystem balances itself. And carpenter ants are definitely not interested in going to your house. No problem with that.
Okay, unless there's wet wood. They seem to be attracted to wet, which you shouldn't have wet wood in your house anyway.
There's no reason for that, yes.
So Anna Blevins says, due to the hurricanes at my house in Swanee County, I have a lot of dead trees. How many dead trees are too many?
I'm biased, but I don't think there's such a thing. Make sure that you don't exceed sort of a safety thing, because then the safety some limits, because that could backfire, of course. For the ecosystem purpose, there is never a limit. Imagine what this landscape looked like before people, right? It was full of dead trees. That's why half of our bugs and half of our birds are adapted to living in dead trees. So from the ecosystem's perspective, there is no limit. From a human perspective and safety, consider what's safe.
Okay. Basim from Seminole County says, in his tree stump, he planted a little herb garden in it, and he drilled holes and filled it with plants and several herbs. So Basim, can you send us a picture of that? Because it sounds really cool.
That's amazing.
People are asking for the QR code again. And so if you want to reshare your presentation
to.
again, so we can put the QR code up. And then somebody else wants to see the website again, and then somebody else wants to see the pretty picture of the heart trunk cross section.
Oh, okay. So here's the QR code. Oh no, that's not for the website, right? That's for the EDIS
Well, she
publication.
wants this one too, so she's gonna
Okay.
get this one now. Janet, if you're paying attention, go ahead and grab that.
Yeah.
And
I will look up.
while you're waiting, I'm gonna ask you, is there anything you can do to your snag in your yard to make it more appealing to wildlife? Deborah is wanting that.
Yeah, this is the website, by the way. And here you can scroll down. There is some explanations, what I already mentioned. Here's how you get to the survey. This is for you. The second one is for you. And down here is a bunch of videos that you are welcome to share with your clients about all kinds of issues or topics related to deadwood.
Good. So what can you do to make your snag more attractive?
Observe it, and you'll see that it's full of life. Sometimes the life is little. Sometimes you'll have to bend down and observe that the most colorful things are the smallest. Those are the pretty parts. The snag itself will start being lovable when you understand that it's full of these little life forms. The whole thing, I like them. Maybe after you understand this dimension, that it's a dynamic thing that lives for many years, maybe decades, maybe you'll start liking it too.
Good, good. Sometimes, Yuri, I water my snag. I don't know, just because I'm crazy, but I have plants on it and I water it, so that's what
great.
happens.
It'll disintegrate faster and it'll feed the soil faster that way.
Good. All right. We have an abundance of rabbits, birds, squirrels due to leaving deadwood. I love to see everything living here. They make me happy. That's good.
Nice.
And then
There was an interesting question in the question and answers that I would like to answer, if I may.
Go for it. You're seeing
Somebody
it faster than I am. Go ahead.
Somebody asked, are there benefits to butterflies in deadwoods? And I will say, undoubtedly, yes. And you know why? Do you know where butterflies overwinter? In deadwood, on the bark, usually, or in the deadwood that's disintegrated. They crawl in, and that's where they stay for the winter. Many other species overwinter as pupae, or in the butterfly's case, it's called chrysalis. The caterpillar crawls into wood. It has to be kind of soft and really mushy, disintegrating dead wood. That's where they create their little cocoon or chrysalis, and the butterfly comes out from it in the spring. So it absolutely is critical for many species of our butterflies and moths.
Awesome question. Lori's asking about, she's got a down turkey oak on the ground. Is that just the same as leaving a stump?
Absolutely. It will support different types of critters, different types of fungi. You'll notice that if the stump is standing, different fungi get to the bottom than to the top. If it's sitting on the ground, it is going to be moist the whole time, and it'll disintegrate faster, and it'll be used by different types of critters. Great. Both are great.
Our neighbor Ann Bryant, she lives around the corner from us. She wants to know, how far from a building can one leave a snag or stump to avoid possible termite problems?
Oh, I see. Well, let me sort of rehash what we've discussed. There's no clear limit, right? The issue is that the termites are not coming from the snag. They're not coming necessarily from the woodpile. If it's separated at least a little bit, they're not going to be like, they could make that little tunnel, but it's rare. If there are termites coming to your house, it's from the underground. from the dead roots.
Okay, and Tim is wondering, do you have to worry about fungus on the dead wood spreading to your live plants?
That is a good question. And here I'm going to go back to our discussion about fungi. There is several 100,000 species of fungi. The fungi, they're a potential threat to your live plants, have nothing to do with the fungi that are eating dead wood. The ones that are a potential problem for plants are pathogens. They're adapted to attack living plant cells and overcome their defenses. Fungi that live in dead wood have no such interest and no such ecology. They have totally different enzymes, and their enzymes work on the dead cellulose. So no relation there at all.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, Anne is wondering about palm trees. Should we allow palm trees to stay in our gardens?
Palms are interesting, right? It'll take a long time for a palm to disintegrate. Meanwhile, it could be a home for woodpeckers, but many fewer fungi and other little insects go into palms just because it has such hard wood. And some palms, in fact, have small crystals of silicon and other compounds in their wood. So they're really hard to eat for many organisms. I would say leave it there, absolutely. Not going to hurt anything, but it'll be a long time for it to disintegrate.
Okay. And then I think we can answer both of these at the same time. Is it useful to put old Christmas trees outside? And then what about creating piles of log and brush piles on
Excellent.
large piece
Both
of
good
property?
questions. So with the Christmas tree, you know, it doesn't hurt, but that kind of gets a little ugly, and it's obvious that it was a Christmas tree, and it looks like it's been forgotten there. So from an aesthetic point, I'm not a fan. Also, if it's a Fraser fir or any of those northern conifers, they're not going to have that many bugs eating them here. So it's all right, but it's not very useful, I would say. Bigger chunks are more useful. And so then we get to the brush pile question. And again, here's my question is maybe a little bit unorthodox. My take on it, my answer is a little unorthodox. But I have brush piles all over the house, and each brush pile, I keep adding wood to it. I don't put my wood on the street anymore. I just create brush piles, and they slowly sink, and I keep adding on them. And you know what happened? Every one of them has either a rabbit or a snake or another critter living in them, and they are like 10 yards apart. I have like 5, 6 of them in my 2-acre lot. And it's amazing. It's like a whole new level of biodiversity that multiple brush piles create.
Great. A mutual friend of ours puts them out in his property, and he calls them his reefs, like little lizard reefs or bird reefs or something like that, which is
life
nice.
attaches on it and can grow from it. That's right.
Right. Let's see. Oh, Susan says her pine snags left over from a tornado, great support for vines for other plants like crossvine and Virginia creeper.
That's right. Yeah.
And then Ramona says, wonderful presentation. Her landscaper and I have left logs and branches and snags on our clients' properties for years.
Nice.
And I make sure to lecture them about leaving the leaves, saving the stems, and making openings for soil. She said that she's going to add this information to her lectures.
I'm glad to hear that. That's great. Yes.
And then the question about the controlled burns. When the state conducts prescribed burns in state parks, are they not burning old wood, underbrush, old grasses that are home to birds, mammals, and microorganisms? What are your thoughts there?
They absolutely are. I would answer 2 more things here. Sometimes one of those grumpy faces also tell us, by leaving dead wood, I'm increasing the fire hazard in my yard. And I would say actually not necessarily. Dead wood does not burn. It burns really poorly because a lot of the biomass is replaced by fungal hyphae and by fungal cells. Fungi don't burn. So the older a snag, the less likely it is that it will burn. Old snags just don't burn. Try to set one on fire. You'll be a hero if you do. But with the prescribed burns, that is true. And there is some sort of a conversation going on in the community of prescribed burns that, where the prescribed burns happen, it's true that there's not much deadwood left. And I don't think this has been figured out.
Well, I guess there's a balance, figuring the risk of wildflower and fire and
Yeah, absolutely.
what is our risk involved and that sort of thing. A couple of y'all have asked about the termite bait. You would ask your pest control operator for Centricon. That is the name of the system, is called Centricon. And for every one that's sold, that Yuri gets a kickback, right, Yuri?
I don't, sadly.
No,
I
it's
get nothing. But the
no,
University of
there's somebody.
Florida, the University of Florida gets royalties and it goes straight into student tuition and so on. So yes, it is really helpful to the institution.
That's good.
I like the question about the Brazilian pepper tree stumps.
Yes,
You
yes.
know, that is sort of the same thing we already discussed with non-native trees. Brazilian pepper trees are eaten by a few bugs, but not very many. And it's the same thing, like with everything, they continue to disintegrate very slowly, unfortunately.
Yeah.
They're not really allelopathic when they get older because all that's left is, the cellulose and such. But some of the key nutrients are in there, and very few of our fungi are adapted to it.
Okay. Yes. All right. It seems like we're getting to the end. Do you see any more questions that we haven't addressed yet?
There was an interesting one about hurricanes. Here's an interesting connection between dead trees and hurricanes. I am very happy to recommend that people do what I call canopy management. If you have really tall, particularly oaks, not live oaks, but those weedy oaks like
Laurel oaks, water
laurel
oaks.
and water oaks, they don't need to be that tall. And in fact, if you trim them about halfway, two things happen. One is if you have live oaks, they will have a chance to restore their canopy to their grandeur. I highly recommend trimming down these weedy oaks so that other vegetation has a chance to regrow, particularly live oaks, which are suffocating out under the canopy of these fast-growing weedy trees. The second thing that happens is that those trees, laurel oaks, live oaks, cherries, sweet gums, those what I call the fast-growing trees, they're not weeds, but they're fast-growing trees, they become a mixture of living and dead tissue. Those are some of the most biodiverse trees. They still have leaves. Part of their vascular system is still pumping and is supporting a bushy crown, and they'll be bushy again in a few years. You won't even know it. But parts of that becomes dead. And that is where a lot of the woodpeckers live. That is where a lot of the owls live. That is where a lot of the beetles, they don't like to live at the bottom, but they live at the top live. So trimming canopies of fast-growing trees is great, and it'll protect you against hurricanes.
Okay. Okay. And then I like the comment from Andrew about using old logs to create raised beds. And then
Perfect.
some people use them in hugelkultur. We don't talk a lot about that in Master Gardener program, but that's another use of those. Finding creative ways to use those logs in the landscape is a really great idea.
Somebody asked if we can inoculate a dying tree with mushroom spores. Absolutely, you can. You can easily buy those. Those are little wooden pegs that are pre-inoculated by oyster mushrooms or lion's mane. I'll have to say that, so like it's hit or miss because our naturally dead stumps are already full of fungi. So when you're adding more, the ones that are added lately have a disadvantage. They often don't take. So for growing your own mushroom garden, it's best to cut down a fresh tree and inoculate the fresh tree. But there's no harm in trying. I got a few oyster mushrooms from my stumps, not very many. I'm not going to try again.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, this is a very important question. Janet had a tree taken down and the remaining stump was ground down. I kept the chips on my property. Are they just as beneficial as if I've kept the whole tree?
They're beneficial, but not as much because once they're detached, they dry up quickly, and the fungal hyphae are not connected as much as they would be in the wood. So I always recommend don't chip your tree, just leave it there. Nature knows what to do with the tree. It does not know necessarily what to do with a pile of chips. There's also an important question, multiple, about Ganoderma, tree pathogens. Those really are tree pathogens. If you find a Ganoderma on a tree, it depends on what tree it is. On palms, if it's the palm-killing Ganoderma, you do want to remove that. Yes, absolutely. The Ganoderma itself lives mostly inside the trunk and in the roots. So it's not going to spread if you have a dead stump on a dead log on the ground. It's not going to support Ganoderma. They live really in stumps that are connected to the ground.
Right. In that same vein, what about armillaria?
Armillaria lives on those trees, yes. Those half live, half dead. Sometimes Armillaria creates those habitat trees. I'm happy with Armillaria. They're fairly short-lived. They're not like Ganoderma, and Armillaria itself feeds lots of other critters.
Okay.
They are not going to kill your live oak. They can infect your laurel oaks and water oaks, those fast trees that are not really defending themselves very well. But honestly, I don't care for those too much. I would rather grow longleaf trees and then have the rest turn into a woody biomass.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, Sandra would like to see the heart picture again.
I
I'm
will
sorry.
do that right away. Give me 1 second.
Lot of great questions, a lot of wonderful answers, Yuri. We had about 450 master gardeners joining in today. I want to encourage you all as we say goodbye and depart. Oh, that's so nice. To take the survey at the end of as you close down, take your questions, and there's an extra question in there that's going to help Yuri as well. And then let's get active with NeighborWood Watch so we can beat the arborist across the state.
Exactly. I like your competitive spirit. That's the point. Thank you.
Exactly. Wonderful. Well, Yuri, thank you so much. And I know that we're going to be hearing from you again, and we look forward to partnering with you on this project. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for the opportunity.
Sure,
Bye.
sure. Take care. Bye-bye.